doctors here. Yeah, so we'll do things in the order we discussed. So, everyone ready? Okay, we're back on the record, everyone, after lunch. It's 1:30 p.m. I understand all the jurors are present. They're in the jury room. They're not yet in the courtroom. There's one issue we need to address before Dr. Jensen returns.
Yes, I expect that after the state finishes its cross with Dr. Jensen, that our next witness would be Mr. Mattioli. And we've discussed it with the parties in chambers, and I think scheduling-wise, it's probably appropriate to engage in the colloquy with Mr. Mattioli now.
Okay. Mr. Mattioli, I have a few questions for you about that decision, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First, do you understand that you have a constitutional right to testify?
Yes, I do.
And do you understand that you have a constitutional right not to testify?
I do.
Do you understand that this decision, whether to testify or not, is for you to make?
Yes.
Has anyone made any threats or promises to try to influence your decision?
No.
Have you discussed your decision, whether or not to testify, with your attorneys, Mr. Hart and Mr. Powell?
Yes, I have.
Have you made a decision?
Yes.
Okay, and what is your decision?
To testify.
Okay. Right, and Mr. Hart and Mr. Powell, have you had the sufficient opportunity to thoroughly discuss this case and the decision whether or not to testify with your client, Mr. Mattioli? Mr. Hart?
We have, Your Honor.
And Mr. Powell?
Yes, Your Honor.
And gentlemen, are you satisfied that he is making this decision knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily? Mr. Hart?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. Powell?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Well, after that discussion and having been present for the duration of the trial, I do find that Mr. Mattioli is making this decision knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily, and the court accepts his waiver of his right not to testify. And so we'll proceed then. I'm going to ask Dr. Jensen to return, and we'll be bringing in the jury. And Deputy.
Before Mr. Tiffin begins his cross, I'm going to move into exhibits I don't think I did, 40 and 45.
40 and 45?
Yeah, the CV and a photograph of the neck.
Okay. Mr. Tiffin, any objection?
No.
Exhibits 40 and 45 are received and marked. Dr. Justin, thank you. Deputy, if you could bring in the jury, please.
I'll move them in front of the jury as well, Judge.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Powell, you had two exhibits you wanted to refer to.
Yes, this would formally move exhibits 40, Dr. Jensen's CV, and exhibit 45, photograph of Mr. Acevedo in depth.
Thank you. That was exhibit 40, correct?
40, yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Tiffin?
No objection.
Exhibits 40 and 45 are received and marked. Back then to, now we're starting with Mr. Tiffin on cross-examination.
Dr. Jensen, the role of a medical examiner at its heart in some ways is to determine a cause of death, correct?
In some cases, yes.
And in your role previously with the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office. That is an office independent of law enforcement, the district attorney's office, public defender's office, anybody else, correct?
It's a separate statutory office, correct?
And you don't consider yourself, when you were doing that, an advocate for any side, correct?
No,
In your current position, do you still ascribe to that? You're not an advocate, you're simply trying to look at information in determining a cause of death.
exactly. I haven't changed my process in looking at cases, whether I'm a paid expert witness or I'm working for my local medical examiner's office.
When we broke right before lunch, essentially, I think the points you made was, it was your opinion that Mr. Acevedo most likely would have survived Mr. Mattioli being on his back if he didn't have these pre-existing conditions, correct?
Correct.
Obviously, Mr. Acevedo had been living with those conditions for a while, correct?
Yes, he had.
The difference between life and then death was Mr. Mattioli being on his back.
That was an important aspect of the prone restraint cardiac arrest, correct?
The slides you looked at, those slides were cuttings of the lungs after Mr. Mattioli, or excuse me, after Mr. Acevedo had died, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Acevedo had obviously been on a ventilator from the 19th until death was declared on the 25th. The heart was taken off, removed from the body on the 27th, and then I imagine he was taken off the ventilator. Is that accurate?
Yes.
What does a ventilator do to the lungs?
Ventilators typically over time, because the person is static, typically they develop pneumonia. There may be something that we call ARDS, which are membranes that form, but the findings that were in the lung related to asthma were not something that developed over 5 days. Those are chronic, debilitating structural problems that occurred because of long-term asthma.
Again, those were conditions that he had been living with, correct?
The lung, yes. The other medical and the assault-like activity, those were new.
In response to being retained to consult in this case, you ended up providing a 6-page report, correct?
Yes.
And in that report, you write, and I quote, "There was no definitive pathological evidence that there was significant compression using a, quote, chokehold, end quote, on Mr. Acevedo." Correct?
Yes.
And the definitive pathological evidence that you didn't see was that the autopsy done by Dr. Peterson on the 28th of April, the strap muscles were uninjured, correct?
Correct.
Strap muscles are where on the neck?
Those are the anterior muscles.
So right
of the
around
neck,
your,
right around the larynx and on the sides.
the hyoid bone, hyoid, HYOID bone, cricoid, and thyroid cartilage are intact, correct?
Correct.
The hyoid bone is where?
The hyoid bone is high up in the neck, basically at the base of the tongue.
The cricoid and thyroid cartilage are where?
Those are basically around the Adam's apple portion of your front neck.
And the mucosa of the larynx, trachea, and bronchia is pintan and unremarkable, correct?
Yes, that's the inside lining of the large airway.
If there had been observed injury to any of those, then you would have had, to use your phrase, definitive pathological evidence of significant compression, correct?
But there would have been some objective evidence, correct?
So we know there's no objective evidence. That doesn't mean, though, that there wasn't some interference with breathing, does it? I mean, let me ask you this. A person could walk up to me and put their arm around my neck such that the crook of their elbow is here, okay? And they might squeeze, not injuring me, but I might have a hard time breathing. Would you agree with that?
That would, what you're describing is a typical carotid chokehold where there's compression of the blood flow on both sides of the neck. We've got large blood vessels on the side of the neck you can feel pulsating. And a carotid chokehold is designed to inhibit blood from coming back from the brain to the heart and from the heart to the brain. So that's typically what's used as a judo hold or something to render someone unconscious quickly. You wouldn't expect there to be extensive hemorrhage there depending upon the level of struggle, I guess.
As part of the information you looked at, you viewed 45 pictures taken of Mr. Acevedo at St. Luke's, correct?
I don't know how many there were, but there were photographs, yes. Correct, 45.
This is exhibit 15, correct?
Yes.
Inside of it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pictures, correct?
Yes.
These are all pictures of Mr. Acevedo in the hospital, correct?
Correct.
Petechial hemorrhages are when small blood vessels, not vessels,
Yeah, capillaries, correct.
burst, correct?
Correct.
And what can cause them to burst?
Pressure, back pressure from the thorax, congestive heart failure, like I mentioned, excessive vomiting, possibly, just forceful pushing, anything that puts strain and back pressure onto the small capillaries.
Put one of the 14 pictures, it's on the monitor. If you don't mind, if you could get off the witness stand.
Sure, Doctor, please.
And just point on that picture, are there petechial hemorrhages that you see, and where are they?
Yes, the petechial hemorrhages are around the soft tissues of the eye, in these areas here. Not sure if this is petechial hemorrhage, but related to those. It's mainly the upper lids and the soft tissue of the eye.
And then down where I'm pointing around the chest, which would be the left shoulder, or on the right shoulder, how would you describe those?
This is a confluence of small petechial hemorrhage. There's a number of hemorrhages, and sometimes they actually coalesce together. We call those Purdue spots. They're present on the right lateral neck, at the base of their area, and over the clavicle, and symmetrically on the left side. And also there's abundant petechiae over the mid-sternal area, as well as cracking down the left side of the arm and over the left bicep.
To you, what does that mean?
So, as I mentioned, it would be consistent with pressure being applied to the back area, increased pressure to the thorax, pressure to go up in the area, and rupture the small blood vessels.
And the thorax is where on the body?
Thorax basically from the neck on down to the level of the urethra.
Okay. If you don't mind. staying there. This is another picture, if you don't mind staying. This is another picture that was in Exhibit 15. Does it show any of the petechial hemorrhages?
I believe there's some on the inside of this eye and some on the outside of the eye there.
A third picture. Did you view anything significant with respect to that, what's depicted there?
Well, actually, this could be an abrasion area. I'm not quite sure, but these look like petechiae. It's a little distorted based on the.
Any significance with the eye being opened?
No, they're observing or trying to observe any evidence of petechiae in the eyeball or conjunctivitis.
It's another picture. What if,
This is the left eye, and you can see that there is one petechiae in the bottom of the conjunctiva of the left eye.
and what about around where the nose and above the,
There's petechiae in this area that was already described in the upper lid, but this is on the lower eyelid.
okay. Another picture, which would be on the right side of the neck and also roughly in the center of the chest. What did you interpret those to be?
That are separate and also coalesce.
And what causes things to, why would they coalesce?
Because there's multiple areas and they coalesce together. It's not a continuing hemorrhages from blood vessels.
And a bruise, how would you tell? Let me ask you this, there's some pictures of the arm, correct? Where they're, and I'll show those in a moment. Those in your view are bruises, okay. Another picture, which would be the right side of the neck. This is the petechiae you've been talking about?
Right, and you can see that these are little punctate, salt-like, the size of salt grains, and then over here they kind of coalesce.
Another picture, it's added a measurement in terms of centimeters, correct? Another picture, what did you view this to show?
It's the front part of the petechiae on the right side, over the clavicle, the head of the clavicle here. You can see the neck is up on the top and it's folded down.
This instrument, you recognize what this is? This instrument?
It looks like a breathing device.
And as one looks at the picture just to the left of it, and then farther along the left, are those also petechiae that have coalesced? This picture, petechiae being measured. And then you had talked about this morning, but you also mentioned now, this is the arm, correct? And what I've just pointed to, are these the bruises on the arm? I don't know if I printed it out, but do they appear to be?
Yes, I mean, I'm putting my hand there to kind of demonstrate how these are consistent with finger and thumb marks.
Just a little different view. Bruises, correct?
Very kind of faint here because of the projection. Idle time.
Yes.
So if there was an incision into those bruises, there would be hemorrhage underneath that and underlying tissue.
And by hemorrhage, you would see blood, is that what you mean?
Sorry, yes.
And then this picture,
That is the right arm, and I don't see a bruise.
although this is the right arm, too, do you see something appears to be measuring here? Or not?
It appears to do that,
Thanks. You can go back. Thank you. Yesterday, I know you weren't here, but there was testimony from Dr. Tolomek, and you know who she is, correct?
Do.
You had in fact had hired her, correct?
I did.
And you know also from the autopsy done by Dr. Peterson that their opinion is that the cause of death is anoxic encephalopathy, correct?
Yes, due to traumatic asphyxia.
Due to traumatic. Your opinion is it's prone restraint cardiac arrest, correct?
Correct.
How are those different? Just explain.
I would just describe it as the asphyxia due to traumatic asphyxia would, anoxic encephalopathy due to a traumatic asphyxia would focus on the brain effect of lack of oxygen. Okay, that's what happened. The brain died because it didn't have enough oxygen. And that's fairly rapid in probably about 3 to 6 minutes of not getting enough oxygen to your brain. You have irreversible brain injury. And so that certification emphasizes the endpoint that he had brain death due to traumatic asphyxia. And traumatic asphyxia is defined as having pressure over the chest and the upper abdomen area. And my opinion as to prone restraint cardiac arrest would bring in other aspects of the mechanism of death, including the cardiac effects and the metabolic acidosis that has occurred when there's decreased blood flow to muscles and other organs, and would encompass more as the mechanism of how that occurs.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that the opinion that I told you was here yesterday and yours are sort of focusing on Mr. Acevedo suffered, his brain didn't get enough oxygen, correct?
Correct.
The focus of Dr. Tolomek, her opinion, is focused on the lack of oxygen due to compression. You've taken a broader perspective?
Correct. Yes, correct. It includes the decreased inspirational air that's caused. It includes the increase in carbon dioxide retention. It includes the decreased blood volume that occurs, and also includes the metabolic acidosis that occurs. So there's a component of asphyxiation. There's a component of metabolic acidosis, and there's a component of cardiac failure.
To use the idea of a chicken and the egg, is there any way to say what came first? Do you understand that? Like, did the compression on the back result in insufficient air causing the heart, in your opinion, stop bleeding, or did the heart stop bleeding after first? If you can get there.
As I mentioned earlier, the literature has indicated that the prone position is inherently safe, but for other conditions such as violent activity, exertion, potentially drugs, and other natural disease. And that the studies show that with compression on the chest, there's a decrease in the amount of air you can bring in, but not necessarily how much oxygen is in your your blood. So it's the point that you're not getting enough air or oxygen to your muscles, but you just require much more oxygen than is typically supplied. You need 10 times the amount because of this exertion.
Judge, the state's going to move into evidence Exhibit 15, which are those pictures, and I have no further questions of Dr. Jensen.
Thank you. Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 15 is received and marked. And back to Mr. Powell.
Just briefly, Dr. Jensen, Mr. Tiffin sort of began by asking you a question to the effect of Mr. Acevedo's been living with these medical conditions for a while, and the only difference now was Mr. Mattioli at some point was on his back during this episode. Do you remember that question?
I did.
And you sort of agreed that's part of the picture that Mr. Mattioli was on his back, correct?
Correct.
Part of your opinion, though, and testimony is that if Mr. Mattioli had been in the same position with a healthy person or somebody without Mr. Acevedo's conditions, that person most likely would not have succumbed the way Mr. Acevedo did.
That's my opinion, yes.
And if I understand the last thing you were talking about regarding a compression in a prone restraint can impact the volume of air coming in, but not necessarily the oxygenation of the blood, is that right?
Correct.
So someone like Mr. Acevedo, because of his respiratory disease, is it fair to say his oxygenation of the blood is lesser than a healthy person?
I would anticipate it would be yes.
Okay, so he's getting less air coming in. That's maybe part of the problem, but another part of the problem, if not a bigger part of the problem, is he has lower oxygenated blood, right?
It would result in a hypoxia that he would have occurred. There was a note, and I think Dr. Pearl's report that indicated when he was sick, he was only bringing in 44% of his anticipated oxygen level. So his tidal volume when he took a big deep breath was only 40% of what would be predicted for somebody of a normal, healthy person.
And Dr. Pearl's report indicated that went up and down over time with Mr. Acevedo.
With treatment, correct.
And so that is a factor, in your professional opinion, that played a role in Mr. Acevedo's death.
Yes.
And lastly, just to be clear, the pictures that Mr. Tiffin just went with you, you were looking at a lot of petechiae around the eye, correct?
In the soft tissue around the eyelids, correct.
That's the orbital or supraorbital region?
Correct.
Super being above the eye, suborbital being below the eye, correct?
Yes.
And again, that petechiae or those petechiae around the eye are consistent with the downward chest compression, correct?
In my opinion, yes.
The ones you would see if there was neck compression are more in the eye, in the conjunctiva.
Typically, yes, and I would also anticipate there to be prominent cyanosis or bluish discoloration of the face due to unoxygenated blood accumulating in the facial area.
And that was not something reported by the responders to the scene.
I did not see it. I did not see it mentioned or observed by EMTs. No.
Nothing further for Dr. Jensen.
Thank you. Mr. Tiffin?
Oh,
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jensen.
Can I be discharged, Your Honor?
Yes, sir. You can step down. Defense, your next witness, Mr. Hart, Mr. Powell.
Thank you. Defense calls Michael Mattioli.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or under the pain or penalty of perjury? Thank you. You can have a seat there. Speak clearly into the microphone. State your name and spell it for the record.
First name Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L. Last name Mattioli, M-A-T-T-I-O-L-I.
Thank you. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Mattioli, what part of the city do you currently reside?
In the south side of Milwaukee.
And were you born and raised on the south side of Milwaukee?
I was.
Did you go to high school on the south side of Milwaukee?
In St. Francis, yes.
Where, in St. Francis?
Thomas More High School.
And did you graduate from Thomas More High School?
I did.
And tell us what year you graduated from Thomas More High School.
That was 2005.
And when you graduated from Thomas More High School in 2005, can you tell us, please, how you continued the rest of your adult life?
In 2006, I was hired with the Milwaukee Police Department as a police aide.
And how long is the police aid program?
You stay a police aide until you reach 21 years of age, and then you enter the police academy.
So roughly 3 years?
Right.
When you completed the police aid program, did you then continue on at the police academy?
I did.
And how long is the academy program?
Roughly 6 months.
So you get 3 years of pre-police training as an intern, and then you get full police training at the academy, is that right?
Correct.
And when you graduated from the academy, were you then sworn in as a Milwaukee police officer?
I was.
And were you assigned to a particular district?
I was. I went to District 7.
And did you remain at District 7 your entire career as a police officer?
Not the entire time, no.
Take us through your progression as a police officer, please, from the time you began at District 7 until the time you got a new assignment.
Sure. I started at District 7 in 2009. I stayed there for only a few weeks, and I shipped off to go to basic training for the Army.
Tell us about that. How is it that a brand-new officer who had just completed the training program and then had gone to the academy decided to enlist in the National Guard?
I enlisted in the National Guard before I went through the police academy, but the Army was kind enough to put off my shipment date until after I graduated the police academy.
Right. And tell us why a aspiring young officer would enlist in the National Guard.
I felt the need to serve my country, and I could do both at the same time. I could be a police officer and be in the National Guard at the same time.
Another way to say that is serve your community and serve your country at the same time.
Right.
All right. And after you completed basic training in the reserves, did you then return to District 7 as a full-time Milwaukee police officer?
I did.
All right. And tell us about your career at District 7.
Sure. I started off District 7. I started field training. I finished that. And then for the first summer, I walked the beat. And then after that, I became a general patrol officer for a few years. After a few years of general patrol, I joined a burglary suppression unit in District 7, and later I joined the anti-gang unit in District 7, and I remained there for the remainder of my time at District 7.
And District 7 patrols what part of the city of Milwaukee?
The district itself is on 36 in Fond du Lac, and the borders are roughly from Center Street north to Villard, 32nd Street all the way west to the border of Wauwatosa area.
And with respect to those specific task force, are those merit-based? I mean, how does one get in the position to serve in that capacity?
I expressed my interest in working on those units, and then I was ultimately picked by a supervisor.
All right. And then you moved your career as an officer downtown, is that right?
I did. I was accepted onto the robbery task force downtown Milwaukee.
And where is the robbery task force, or where was the robbery task force at that time based?
It was in the District Number 1 building down here.
Right next door.
Right over there.
And you were part of the robbery task force. Was that a particular unit within District 1 or CIB, I think it was called?
Right. It was a unit within the Criminal Investigation Bureau.
The robbery task force was within the Criminal Investigation Bureau at District 1.
Right.
And did you remain as a part of the Criminal Investigation Bureau until your time with the department ended?
I did, yes.
All right. I want to direct your attention to March of the year 2020. Do you recall that time frame?
I do.
And around March 2000, well, let me back up. When you came downtown into the CIB and the robbery task force, were you afforded certain privileges in terms of additional outside work?
I was.
All right, tell us about that, please.
As a police officer, you can work multiple different overtime events downtown, like at the Pfizer Forum or Summerfest events or at the Northwestern Mutual building.
And did you take advantage of that?
I did. I worked a lot of those.
And in particular, with respect to the Northwestern Mutual Life building, you were working overtime as a Milwaukee police officer patrolling that campus, is that right?
Right.
And in that context, did you have occasion to meet a fellow by the name of Joel Acevedo?
Yes, he was working at the Northwestern Mutual building as a security guard, and that's how I met him.
All right, and do you have a belief as to what time frame you first met Mr. Acevedo at, while the two of you were working at Northwestern Mutual?
It was in 2019. I don't know the exact time.
All right, moving ahead then to 2020, and in March, well, let me ask it this way. Before March of 2020, did you ever have any other kind of relationship with Mr. Acevedo other than a professional relationship at NML?
Over the course of about a year of me working at Northwestern, we became friendly, and we were able to socialize at one time together.
And would that have been in March of 2020?
It was.
All right, that's really what I'm trying to get at in an awkward way. So in 2020, you and Mr. Acevedo went out socially for the first time, is that right?
We did.
All right. I'm going to show you what's been marked, actually received in that. You saw the picture of yourself, Mr. Acevedo, and Mr. Janowski from March of 2020?
Earlier in this case, yes, I
Yes.
did.
Do you recall that photograph?
I do.
As I recall it, it was the three of you gentlemen dressed in green T-shirts out celebrating something. Is that fair?
Right. It was a St. Patrick's Day celebration.
All right, tell us what you remember about that particular day.
The four of us went out to it was a pub crawl. We went down.
Let me stop you for a minute. The photograph shows you, Mr. Janowski, and Mr. Acevedo. Do you believe there was an additional person?
Right. Chris Peters was there
Mr.
also.
Peters was with you, but not part of that photograph.
Right.
All right, continue, I'm sorry.
The four of us went to the bars downtown Milwaukee here. It was a pub crawl for St. Patrick's Day. It was nothing spectacular. It was nothing out of the ordinary.
Unremarkable in most respects.
Right.
Was it significant relative to the facts of this case because that is the day that you introduced Mr. Janowski and Mr. Peters to Mr. Acevedo?
Right. That was the first time.
Prior to that day, Mr. Acevedo was only known to you, is that right?
Correct.
All right. And did Mr. Acevedo appear to get along with Mr. Janowski and Mr. Peters after you made that introduction?
Yes.
And in fact, do you have a recollection of approximately what time you called it quits from the pub crawl?
I do. It was about 9 o'clock. I went home.
And how'd you get home?
I took an Uber.
All right. And did Mr. Janowski and Mr. Peters and Mr. Acevedo remain?
I know Andrew went home around the same time as me, and Christopher and Joel stayed behind.
Mr. Acevedo and Mr. Peters continued the party.
Right.
All right. Fast forward now to the next month, April 18th of 2020, the reason that we're all here today. You remember that night?
I do.
clear as day?
I remember.
And how was it that you, Mr. Acevedo, Mr. Peters, and Mr. Janowski came together that particular night?
It was a Saturday night, and I invited them to come over to my house.
And what was your purpose in inviting over those three guys?
Just to come over, have a couple of drinks, and sit around we had a fire in the backyard, and that was all.
And did you do that?
We did.
And did you remain outside the whole night?
No. Eventually, we went inside the house.
And had you been drinking most of the night from the time all three of your guests arrived until the end of the night?
Yes, we did.
Would that apply equally to all four of you?
Yes, all of us.
And was there an understanding before they came over as to whether Mr. Peters or Mr. Janowski, or for that matter, Mr. Acevedo, were going to spend the night, or was there not an understanding?
There was an understanding for Christopher and for Andrew. They had both slept in my house before, so it was kind of just implied that they were welcome to stay over. Joel had never slept in my house before, but at some time during the night, he asked me, "Is it okay if I sleep over?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. We've all been drinking, so it's fine. You can stay here."
Had Mr. Acevedo ever even been to your home before that night?
He had been there the night that we were talking about, the Shamrock Shuffle. We all met at my house, but then we never went inside my house that day. So he had been there one other time.
All right, so at some point during the night, you had conversation with Mr. Acevedo, made it clear to him that it was okay, since he had had that too much to drink, that he could stay over, no problem.
Right?
All right. And did you move the party inside at some point?
Yes. Eventually we went inside.
And when you went inside, where'd you go?
We sat in the kitchen at the kitchen table.
And people continued to drink?
Yes, we did.
All right. And as far as you knew, Mr. Mattioli, was alcohol the only substance being consumed that night by you and your guests?
As far as I knew, yes.
At any point, did you observe any of your guests using cocaine or engaging in conduct that was suggestive of cocaine use?
No.
And so if it was going on, you had no knowledge of it, and it was being kept from you, is that fair?
That's fair.
Had you known that your guests were using cocaine, and an illicit, illegal narcotic in your home, how would you have responded?
I would have kicked him out of my house.
Okay, you're a sworn police officer, or you were at the time, and are you a drug user, or were you a drug user yourself?
No.
So, do you have a recollection of what time approximately you called it quits for the night?
I don't remember the exact time I went to bed. I know it was late. It was after midnight sometime.
All right, and based upon your recollection, were you the first or last to go to bed?
I don't remember exactly who all went to bed at what time, but I believe Andrew was going to sleep around the same time as me.
Do you know where Mr. Janowski slept that evening?
He slept on the couch in the living room on the first floor.
And where did you go to sleep for the night?
I went upstairs in my bedroom.
And when you got to your bedroom, did you brush your teeth, get in your pajamas, climb under the covers, and go night-night?
Nope, I just laid in bed and went to sleep.
In your clothes?
Yes,
Kind of fell into your bed on top of your sheets and passed out. Is that fair?
that's fair.
And did you remain there until the following morning?
I did.
And how were you awakened the following morning?
I woke up because I felt somebody touching me, and I felt somebody rummaging through my pocket of my pants that I had on, my right pocket.
Your right front pants pocket?
Right?
And did you open your eyes?
I did.
And what did you see?
I saw that it was Joel standing over me, and he was rummaging through my pockets, and I woke up and I stood up, or I'm sorry, I sat up on the bed, and he quickly took his hand out of my pocket and took a step back.
And what did you do?
I asked him, I said, "What are you doing?"
And did he respond?
No, he was silent. He didn't say anything back.
And what did you do next?
The next thing I said to him was, really, you're going to steal from me just like that?
And what did you mean by that?
Just what I said. I asked him, basically, why are you stealing from me?
This was your friend in your home.
Right?
You had invited him over, and now you had discovered his hand in your pocket while you were sleeping.
Right?
You asked him about it.
I'm sorry, say that again?
And you asked him about it,
I did.
and he had no answer.
He didn't respond.
What did he do next?
I asked him what he was doing. He didn't respond. Then I said, really, why are you stealing from me? And then he immediately became defensive, loud, angry. He started yelling, saying, no, I didn't steal from you. I didn't steal from you. And while he was doing that, he was taking all the things out of his pockets and throwing them at me and saying, look, I didn't steal anything from you. And I'm still laying on my bed, and he's throwing all these things that he had in his pockets on me.
While denying that he was doing what you suspected he was doing.
Right,
What you saw him do,
right.
and what you felt him do.
That's right.
Okay, then what happened?
The next thing I said was, you need to leave my house right now.
And why did you tell him that?
Because I had just seen him trying to steal from me in my bedroom, and it was in my dark bedroom, and I knew what he was doing, even though he's denying it. I knew what just happened.
So, what happened next?
I stood up out of bed, and I told him, you need to leave. I stood up out of bed, and he walked down the stairs first, and I walked behind him.
And the two of you arrived on the first floor within seconds of one another?
Right?
Did you continue to tell him he needed to leave?
I did. I told him to leave my house probably about 15 times, and he refused.
Now, when you got to the bottom of the stairs, that's right at the front door, is that right?
The front door is there, yes, at the bottom of the stairs.
Right. Is that a door that you commonly use?
No, we'd never really used that door.
And was there a reason you didn't use the door?
Yeah, yes. Everybody just used the kitchen door in my house, the side door, and the front door, something was wrong with the door handle. It was really messed up, so nobody really used it.
Just functionally, it's not a door you used in your home.
That's right.
Is your home a palace?
No, it was not a palace.
Modest, small, south side home.
It was a small house.
Okay, so Joel, you need to leave, you need to leave, you need to leave. What's he doing in response?
We're in the living room. Joel was in the living room. He was pacing back and forth in my living room. And I just kept telling him, no, you need to leave. I was pointing like this towards my kitchen door, saying, you need to get out of my house.
Let me stop you there. What you saw, Mr. Acevedo, in terms of the pacing and the aggression and the anger, is that the way Mr. Acevedo had appeared to you either the previous night when you were all sitting out by the fire and then later as you came in, or any point prior to that in your relationship with him?
No. In the morning, he was a completely different person than I've ever seen him before.
Okay, so you're pointing to the kitchen door, you need to leave, and he's pacing back and forth, and what does Mr. Acevedo do next?
Well, he was yelling at me. I was telling him to leave, and he would say, no, fuck you. I didn't do anything, and other words I can't remember. He was pacing back and forth, and Andy was sleeping on the couch right there. Joel shook Andy and woke him up, and Andy stood up off from the couch and just kind of stood there and was probably trying to figure out what's going on.
Okay, what was going on?
Well, I was yelling at Joel to leave the house, and he was yelling back at me. That's what was happening right there.
And to that point, had anyone come into physical contact with anyone else?
Not yet.
Did that change?
It did.
When?
Shortly after this, Christopher Peters came upstairs. This is the point when Joel, he lunged at me and he hit me in my like chest area right here.
When you say he hit you, did he punch you? Did he grab you? Did he slap you?
He lunged at me with his right arm and kind of pushed me, hit me right here.
Right. And did you stagger from that?
I took a step back.
And describe for this jury, please, what size of man Mr. Acevedo was.
He was a large man. He was about as tall as me. I'm 6'3". I know he was around 270 pounds, and I was about 230 pounds at the time.
So to lay this scene out, you're in your small living room in a small, modest home. Mr. Acevedo is refusing to leave. He's pacing back and forth in a way that you've never seen him before, and he reaches out and pushes you in your chest, making physical contact with you for the first time.
That's right.
You mentioned Mr. Peters. Do you know where he slept that evening?
I think he slept in the basement.
And you say he came up. Does that mean that you saw him walk up from the basement to the first floor where you, Mr. Janowski, and Mr. Acevedo were standing?
Right. Christopher walked up. Well, he walked around the corner right from where the basement door was. So I assumed he came from the basement.
Okay, I'll show you what has been received as Exhibit 25, and ask you if that is the area of your living room, the stairs leading upstairs from where you and Mr. Acevedo came, and the archway where Mr. Peters came up from the basement.
That's right.
You can actually see all of those things in Exhibit 25, am I right?
Yes.
When Mr. Peters came up from the basement, where was he standing?
Right in that archway. Kind of around the corner to the left. Archway.
I'm
Right.
pointing with my index finger on the left side of the archway. Is that where you're describing?
Yes.
And that would be an area just around the corner from the landing of the stairway leading down to the basement.
That's right.
And where was Mr. Acevedo, as you recall?
He was standing right near the Kramer poster right there.
I'm pointing in the middle underneath this poster. Is that your recollection?
Yes.
Of where Mr. Acevedo was at this point?
Yes.
And where were you?
Just to the left of that, by the stairs.
And when Mr. Acevedo lunges at you for the first time, does anything get knocked over?
Not that time, no.
Okay, so you've seen a photograph with the lamp. Where was the lamp stationed?
He had that tall silver lamp, and that was standing right by the poster, right there.
And when you say by the poster, was it on the left, in the middle, or on the right side?
I believe it was right to the right of the poster.
Right here, where my index finger is now.
Right.
Was it plugged into this outlet, if you know?
Yes.
Okay. What happens after Mr. Acevedo lays hands on you and Mr. Peters now is up on the landing in the first floor?
I remember I pointed at Joel and I said to Christopher, I looked at Christopher and I said, he was stealing from me. And the next thing I know, Joel swings and punches Christopher right in the face.
Right in the face?
Right in the face. And it was a hard punch. I could hear the connection. It was a good punch.
Bone on bone?
Right. It was like a cracking noise.
Cracking noise of Mr. Acevedo's fist to Mr. Peters' face.
That's right.
What happened to Peters after he got smoked in the face?
Peters fell backwards around that corner and out of my view.
And what happened to Mr. Acevedo after he took the punch at Mr. Peters?
Joel, he took that punch so hard that it knocked him off balance and he fell over. And when he did that, he knocked over that lamp and the lamp fell down towards me and the glass broke everywhere and it was just chaos for a second there.
So the force of Mr. Acevedo's punch at Mr. Peters, suppose coupled with drinking all night, caused him to lose his balance and actually fall on the floor himself?
That's right.
And you described the scene now as chaos.
It was. All that happening in a tight spot. It was tight,
Oh, all in a tight spot.
right?
So all this jostling is going on in a matter of minutes after you're awakened from a sound sleep.
That's right.
Chaos.
It was.
And as soon as you see Mr. Acevedo on the ground, what do?
I saw Joel, when he fell over, he started to get back up. And that's when I got on top of him because I didn't want him to stand back up. I knew that as soon as he got back up, there was going to be more punches thrown, and I did not want that to happen.
Okay, so you did what?
I got on top of him and tried to basically wrestle him to the ground to keep him back down so he
What
couldn't
was your
stand up.
purpose in doing that? I understand you said you didn't want him to get back up. But did you punch Mr. Acevedo then?
No,
Did
never.
you kick him?
No.
And by the way, did you have a service revolver in the home that day?
I did have my my duty gun in the house, yes.
Did you ever for 1 minute think of retrieving your duty revolver?
I did not.
And why didn't you punch Mr. Acevedo in response to him putting his hands on you and punching Mr. Peters in the face?
I didn't feel the need to hurt him. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted to hold him down until the police could arrive.
And as you get on top of him, did he continue to struggle with you?
He did.
And how was he struggling physically?
I was on top of him. He was trying to stand back up, and I was trying to keep him on the ground. And we kind of wrestled our way into the kitchen area.
Okay, and you have a pet, Mr. Mattioli?
A pet? I do. I have a small dog.
And was the dog around?
It was.
And was there a dog food bowl in the kitchen?
There was.
And in the process of wrestling with Mr. Acevedo and trying to keep him to the ground, did the bowl get knocked over?
It did.
And the lamp you spoke of on, you see that on Exhibit 6?
Yes, I do.
That's the lamp that got knocked over as you and Mr. Acevedo are hustling?
Yes, that's it.
And Exhibit 5 shows it at the bottom of the stairway as well, is that right?
Yes.
And that's the stairway leading to the basement, or that's the stairway leading up to your bedroom?
Leading up to my bedroom.
And throughout this struggle, is Mr. Acevedo continuing to try to stand up?
Yes, he was.
And is he making it easy, or is he fighting back?
He was fighting back. I think it was several times I had his arms. I was holding his arms behind his back, or trying to, and he was able to pull away from it, and he was able to stand, not completely stand up, but he was able to get up on his hands and knees with me on him several times.
You've just motioned with your two hands. Tell us and describe for us what you were trying to do with your hands and Mr. Acevedo's arms.
I was basically, I had each one of my hands wrapped around his arms for a few different times, and I was just trying to hold his hands or his arms back so he couldn't, so I could get him on the ground.
With varying degrees of success.
Right.
Did there come a time when Mr. Acevedo stopped struggling with you?
Eventually we calmed down and were basically exhausted from struggling for so long.
You included.
Right.
And what did Mr. Acevedo do that demonstrated that he was exhausted?
He, at some point in the kitchen, he stopped struggling with me, So, or he stopped trying to stand up. So I stood up, and I got my cell phone out and I dialed 911.
I want to play that call for you.
Okay.
Just want to remind everyone in the gallery, no reactions are allowed. I've seen some reactions. If I see one more, that person is leaving.
Mr. Mattioli, I am going to play Exhibit 1, which is the 911 tape. You've heard that before, yes?
Yes.
The state introduced it through Investigator Bloom earlier this week.
Right.
All right, we're going to go slowly because I want you to describe for us what was going on throughout this call.
Okay.
We are at the point now where Mr. Acevedo has stopped struggling with you. You stood up and called 911. Is that what you said?
Right.
All right.
Rich, can you put the system on my computer?
Sure.
Hello.
Yes, 911.
Hey, Al.
Who says hello?
That was me.
And is that the 911 operator that says 911?
Right.
I'm a police officer, and I need help over at my house.
What's that?
Is that you?
Yes, it was.
And what do you tell the 911 operator?
I said I'm an off-duty officer and I need help at my house.
And what did you mean by that?
Just what I said. I needed help. I needed somebody to help me over there.
Help you with Mr. Acevedo.
Correct.
Because he had just attempted to steal from you and punch Mr. Peters in the face.
That's right.
Okay, please.
West Cleveland Avenue.
What is the address? Hello, what is the address?
Oh, yeah.
Hello?
You hear, oh yeah, fuck you, do you hear that?
I do.
Who's that?
That was me.
And are you answering the 911 caller? I'm sorry, are you answering the 911 operator?
I don't think so. At that time, I lost control of my phone.
And so you believe that you no longer are in control of your phone?
Right.
And Mr. Acevedo, was he still prone on the ground?
He was when I made the call. When I first made the call, I was standing up over him. I was watching him and I was making the phone call and he was yelling some things. And then after I said I'm an off-duty officer, I need help, that's when he tried to stand back up and I tried to get him to stay down where he was.
All right, Mr. Acevedo was able to hear that you were calling the police, asking them for help to come and assist you.
He did, because he was right, I was right above him.
Okay, please.
Hello?
Stop it right there. What's going on right now?
Joel and I were struggling with each other in the kitchen. I was trying to get him again to stay down and he was trying to get back up.
You punching him down?
No,
Ever throw a punch at him?
no, I never threw a punch at him.
Where are your hands?
I don't remember exactly the timeline of the call, but I was holding his arms behind his, or trying to hold his arms behind his back several times.
Okay. To try to force him back down on the ground, for what purpose?
I wanted to keep him there until the police showed up.
Police had now been called,
Right,
and you assumed they were on their way.
yes.
Please.
Hello, sir? Hello? Hello?
Hey, 4502 West Cleveland Avenue. 4502 West Cleveland Avenue.
What's the,
All right, who is that speaking?
That was me.
And what are you telling the 911 operator?
That was my address.
For where to send help,
Right.
please?
what's going on there?
What was that?
What is going on at the location?
4502 West Cleveland.
What is going on there?
There's a man that's attacking us.
Who's that?
That was Christopher Peters.
And is Peters repeating your address to the 911 operator?
I think he did, yes.
And are you continuing to struggle with Mr. Acevedo as he resists your attempt to keep him on the ground?
Right.
Please.
The man, police officer's house. This man is attacking us.
Okay, what's this man's name?
The man attacking us, his name is Joel.
He said Joel. Is he white, black, and
What did Mr. Peters just say to the 911 operator?
He said there was a man attacking us, and his name was Joel.
And who? So the man that he was referring to was Mr. Acevedo?
Correct.
And he had attacked you. Mr. Peters tells the 911 operator that in real time, yes?
He did.
Is that because that's what happened?
Yes.
Play it, please.
Asian?
He's, Hispanic. And, yeah. Michael Mattioli, police officer. We're here.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Michael Mattioli, and a police officer, the house.
Now, do you hear what appears to be heavy breathing?
Yes.
Who's that breathing?
I don't know exactly. It was either me or Joel.
Were you breathing hard?
We were both, we were struggling for quite some time, so yes.
Okay, thank you.
We're at. The man is attacking all of us. Just fucking
Okay, is anyone
And Peters said he's attacking all of us? Is that what he said?
Yes, he did.
That was Mr. Peters who said that?
Right.
Is that because that's what was happening?
Yes.
Okay, please.
hurt?
Yeah, just please come as soon as possible.
Sir, I need you to just answer the questions. Is anyone hurt?
Oh, well, yeah. I'm a fucking bloody nose.
911 operator asked Mr. Peters, anybody hurt?
Right.
You hear that?
I did.
And how did he answer?
Christopher said he had a bloody nose.
He said he was hurt.
Right.
Did he say that because he was hurt?
He must have.
Oh, he got punched in the face, you saw.
Right.
He wasn't making that up, was he?
No,
Please. Did you punch him?
I did not.
Mr. Janelle, did you punch him?
No.
I swear you.
Do you need medical attention?
No, I don't. Fucking lay down. I ain't you asshole. You fucking did.
How many people were attacked, sir?
You wanna fucking blame this on me? You don't blame us on everybody but you.
911 operator says, how many people were attacked, sir? Did you hear that?
I did.
And how did Mr. Peters respond to that?
I don't remember what he said.
I thought I heard two. Is that because two people were attacked?
Yes, they were.
You and Mr. Peters?
Right.
Thank you. Please.
But you fucking did this. Yeah, Michael, don't worry.
Two people, including you, or you and one other person, sir?
Me and at least one other person.
Okay.
We got a murder trial.
Okay, and Joel is still there, correct?
Correct. Oh, yeah! Yes, he is.
And your name?
Yeah. I'm Chris.
Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Chris. 4502 West Cleveland Avenue. Is this a single family house?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
All right. We got help on the way, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right.
All right. What did she say at the end of that call?
I think she said help is on the way.
her on the way, help is on the way. Did you hear her say that?
I did.
What did you believe what was on the way?
I knew the police were on their way.
Okay. So, is that what you wanted?
Right, that's why I called.
Why? Why?
Because Joel was, I mean, I just saw him trying to steal from me, and then he started assaulting people in the house, so, and he was refusing to leave, so that's why I called the police.
And you were waiting for their help.
I was.
And did Mr. Acevedo want to leave?
No.
When given the opportunity to do so, did he leave?
No, he did not.
How many times do you think you asked him to leave your home when he refused?
About 15 times. I just kept yelling at him, yelling, "Get out of my house, get out of my house."
Initially, were you keeping him there against his will?
No.
At what point did you try to restrain him?
Only after he started throwing punches.
And chaos ensued.
Right.
Do you know how the 911 call ended?
Christopher had the phone, so I don't know exactly. I mean, I heard it just now. They said,
You didn't say hang up the phone or anything like that.
no.
And where was Mr. Janowski at this point?
I don't know the exact timeline, but at some point during the struggle, Andrew Janowski came and held down Joel's legs.
Did you ask him to do that?
No.
Did you say grab him, get him, hurt him, punch him, choke him?
No, I didn't say anything like that.
But whatever Mr. Janowski did, he did it on his own.
That's right.
And during the struggle, do you ever check to make sure Mr. Acevedo is okay?
I did.
Tell us.
Eventually, after our fight had toned down, we calmed down a little bit. I know I was exhausted. I checked, I looked down, I saw that he was breathing. I checked, I saw the rise and fall of his chest, and I thought, okay, fight should be over. I know the police will be on their way. I thought everything was good.
All right. And where were you physically in relation to Mr. Acevedo at this point?
I was on his back,
And were you on his mid-back, low back, or upper back?
upper back.
And where were your knees?
My knees were on the ground, straddling him.
Grounded on either side of Mr. Acevedo's shoulders?
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. My knees were down more towards his waist area.
But how about your legs? Were they grounded on the ground or were they on Mr. Acevedo's back?
No, my knees were on the ground.
And where were your hands and arms?
I had my hands down. My right arm was on the floor underneath his neck and chin area, and my right hand was, my right elbow was on the ground, forearm on the ground next to the left side of his head.
Were you choking him?
No,
Were you restricting the airflow to his brain while you had him held to the ground?
no,
Did you ever rear back your elbow and get it underneath his chin so that he wasn't breathing?
no, not at all.
Were you up almost over his shoulders, holding him until the police could arrive?
Yes, that's fair.
I want to show you what I'm going to mark for identification purpose as a let's go to the video, it's easier. Oh, there it is. Thank you. I put on the screen the video from April 19th, 20. It's marked 12:38 and 51 seconds. Do I have that right?
I believe the date is right, but that time cannot be right.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just identifying the part of the video.
Right,
You see that?
I do,
You see yourself in this photograph?
I do,
And do you see Mr. Acevedo in this photograph?
I do,
You also see an outline of Mr. Janowski in this photograph.
I do. It's hard to see, but he is there.
And tell us where Mr. Janowski is in this.
I think right where the mouse is, that's Janowski. It's just very dark.
And you, are you aware that Mr. Janowski is there?
Yes,
On his left.
right.
And do you see where your knees are? Are they anchored on the floor or are they on Mr. Acevedo's back?
They were on the floor.
And do you see Mr. Acevedo's left arm?
I do.
And does that appear to be out at about a 45-degree angle with his palm, or at least his left palm, down flat on the floor?
Yes, almost like a push-up position.
Right. And you appear to be hunched over the top of him. Is that what you recall?
Yes, I do.
And that's where you have told us your right arm is underneath his chin and your left arm is by his head. Is that right?
That's right.
Mr. Mattioli, did you ever lock your right arm with your left hand around Mr. Acevedo's neck at any point during that struggle?
No, I did not.
Was your full weight, body weight, on Mr. Acevedo's back at this point?
No, because I had my knees and my elbows on the ground.
So what is on Mr. What part of you is making contact with Mr. Acevedo?
I guess it was my torso area.
Your chest is making contact with what part of Mr. Acevedo?
His upper back.